I would like to introduce you to Ludovic Louze from SKINsoft. He's going to talk today about how to reconcile environmental consciousness with the choice of a collection management software. So please, hopefully your headphones are working and you can hear this. Give him a warm round of applause. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can hear me. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, so my name is Ludovic. I handle international projects at SKINsoft, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that is obviously increasingly important in nowadays society, and that is the environment. So obviously, regardless of the industry that we work in, the environment is supposed to be, is a true challenge, and it's one of our daily collective tasks to figure out new solutions to know how to protect the environment. And the very meaning of our presentation is basically to show that collection management software providers can play an important part. Obviously, when it comes to selecting a new collection management software, the environment may not be the top priority, because we think about requirements and how to, respond to specific needs. But increasingly, the environment is taking an important place in that overall consideration. And today, we wanted to share some interesting perspectives, because obviously this is a continuous thinking process. There is no definitive measures. And as I said, what is at stake is to constantly improve how we're going to address these issues. And so the purpose is basically to share today some interesting perspectives for museums as to how to select a new collection management software with the environment in mind. And for that, I'm going to use a relevant example, because obviously we can speak for ourselves. I'm going to take the example of SKINsoft. And so as a very brief introduction, I wanted to make sure that you know a little bit of SKINsoft and who we are. So just in a few words, SKINsoft is an IT research lab based in France, and we have international offices in Montreal, Canada, and in Singapore. So we try obviously to cover most time zones in the world. And I think I just need to explain the name a little bit, because SKINsoft, we don't sell beauty products, of course, but with the name, we try to convey the idea that a software can have multiple skins, basically for institutions having multiple types of collections, multiple types of needs. And instead of just them choosing several software to handle these very specific and different needs and collections, everything can be gathered into one software. So basically, this is what we do. And so we work with a wide variety of different cultural institutions. So museums, of course, film archives, exhibition centers, libraries, even in the private sectors as well, so luxury brands, airlines, and more to come, obviously. And today, we are a growing team. As of today, we are 35 people operating from the headquarters and the international offices. And one thing that I would like to point out is that this team is fairly young. I think the age average is about 30 years old. And I say this because obviously, in the world that we live in, I think that the new generations have a voice. And the fact that we have, young people in our team, they tend to bring a certain passion and commitment to a lot of different challenges that we face today, and where we need to, improve some practices. So obviously, there are some purely technical aspects, like the inclusion of AI, the security of data, everything with GDPR related, but not limited to that. And also social related challenges like considerations for minorities, and obviously the environment. And we could run, a presentation for each individual subject, but today we're going to talk about the environment, because as I said, this is something that cultural institutions are paying attention to in an increasing way. So for this presentation, actually, and again, I'm going to take the example of SKINsoft, but I'm going to ask, two main questions. And the very first question actually relates to the profile of the software provider. And then that includes basically how the company structures itself, how it does articulate environmental consciousness with its own business model, and to which extent the vision it carries out for customers' relations fits environment-friendly goals. And to answer this question, so obviously there are 2 points that I would like to address. And the first one, I'm going to talk about it very briefly because it sounds maybe simplistic, but it's not, because the office itself is not something that usually we think about when it comes to working with providers and other companies like subcontractors. The office itself is like the business card, of the entire company. And so it's very important to know basically from where the company operates and how it is handled internally. So in the case of SKINsoft, the interesting story, and actually the very first picture that you saw in the introduction slide is actually a picture of our own office. And we've been in a building that is actually an old factory, and it has been rehabilitated a few years ago to transform it into a low energy building. And the location also of the office is interesting because we wanted a human scale city. We as we are a French company, the tendency is to, if you want to go big, you go to Paris, but this is not what we wanted to do. We wanted to settle shop in a green city, and that is Besançon, actually. I don't know if you know anything about this lovely city. It's a 2-hour drive from the Switzerland border. And the idea is not only to make sure that the building itself was designed to respond to, environmental challenges, but also to make sure that the people working there can walk up to their, with sustainable means of transportation. So people usually walk there or use the bikes, etc., but no cars. So it was, as I said, it sounds a bit simplistic, but it's still important to know how the people operate from their office. The second point has to do with customer relations and how exactly the team must operate. And here there are a few things that we might say. So the very first thing, obviously, is how internally, environmental consciousness is implemented. So here at SKINsoft, we have a policy fully dedicated to managing key actions as environmental measures, as we call them. So there are a lot of them, obviously, which are, basic stuff that we tend to do on a daily basis. So I'm not going to talk about that much. But beyond this internal aspect, what is at stake is obviously how all the services that we provide to museums and cultural organizations, broadly speaking, are provided with the environment in mind. So for several years now, and actually the COVID outbreak a few years ago had accelerated this transformation at SKINsoft. But we actually have been carried out since then a new kind of approach that aims at reconciling non-carbon emission with what we call customer proximity, basically meaning that we want to maintain a close relationship with every one of our partners without being physically there. And the idea is being able to operate, remotely 100% as per an implementation plan that places constant dialogue at the heart of our approach. So as part of a software integration program and process, there are a few missions that we have to perform and carry out. And therefore, we have put together several different groups of experts taking care of data migration, taking care of software configuration, taking care of training, and making sure that our approach fits, a long distance communication tools and the fact that we're not physically there. It doesn't mean that we operate 100% remotely, because obviously sometimes our partners require an on-site presence for key moments during the implementation process. So in that case, we abide by these requirements, but this is no longer the norm. And here at SKINsoft, we are now in major cases providing all these services, from the installation up to the maintenance services, completely remotely without necessarily being on site for the implementation, which obviously helps us, reducing our carbon emissions drastically. The second question now goes simply beyond, these internal aspects and how the services are provided from, a general standpoint. But here, it has to do with how the company conceives and hosts the software solution. So, in other words, how the company articulate the customer requirements with the environment in mind, as always. And here there are three major points that we think are worth mentioning. And again, things that might not be necessarily things that we think about when selecting a collection management software. The very first thing is the question of the technologies. Here at SKINsoft, actually, since the very beginning, we have been strong defenders of the web-based technologies. Because obviously this type of technology favors, not only mobility, but also avoids any dependencies with physical workstations or physical hardware that are on site. So basically what it means is that we have favored specific technologies that fits remote working and long distance working from home, obviously. And again, the COVID outbreak reinforced this important aspect of collaborations because people working in museums sometimes need to access their database and their collections when they are not on site. Sometimes they need to work from home. So obviously this technology, from our point of view, was the good choice. And as a matter of fact, actually, SKINsoft never transitioned from a purely hardware software to a web-based software. Since the very beginning, it was part of our business model to really go for a web-based software. Of course, when we talk about technologies, this is a question that is actually part of a more global approach to software development and conception. And when we talk about that, there are a few important, simple yet important reflexes that we could favor to make sure that the software that we implement does not lead to an important consumption of resources. And there is one key aspect to it, and it's the quality of code. So what I mean by that is I can take the analogy of, driving a car. I am departing from point A and I need to go to point B. So you can imagine that the faster way to do so is just to draw a straight line and go from A to B. Code quality makes sure that the software helps you to go down that straight line without, making sure that you can just turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right until you get to point B, therefore leading to superficial consumption of resources. So again, that question actually is very important because it questions the relationship that the software provider has with its own products. And in the case of SKINsoft, as I said, in the introduction, we are an IT research lab. So it means that we constantly work on the product. We make sure that not only the code is of quality, but we make sure that this, all the ergonomics related aspects can fit, the quality of code, making sure that if you need to do something, you don't need to, go through different steps and, you get right to the point. So quality of code and ergonomics are obviously major points of concerns when it comes to assessing whether a solution fits, a good approach in terms of IT resources consumption. And then one last thing that I wanted to address as well, and just taking things from a distance, it's also how to install everything, the software and the components that we're going to attach to the software, etc. So here again, there are interesting perspectives because sometimes museums prefer to host everything, on site. Others, prefer to have external hostings. Here at SKINsoft, we are, again, strong defenders of external hosting because obviously it's much better for according to industry practices, but also for the environment, to make sure that we can optimize everything and have everything in the same place. But beyond that, also, the question is about the configuration of the different servers that we would make available to the museums to make sure that the system can be up and running in the most efficient way. And I'm going to give an example. When it comes to data accessibility, most projects involve, a one single layer of hosting. And it means basically that the data is not structured in some kind of hierarchy, and everything needs to be accessed at once, regardless of IT consumptions and resources consumptions, etc. So what we defend actually is a new kind of approach that is actually what we call distributed architecture, which basically enables to have multiple layers involving what we call hot storage and cold storage. Hot storage for data that needs to be accessible at any time. So meaning that if you need to get the data at once, obviously you'll have the consumption that goes along with it. But if you have also data that you need to preserve but do not necessarily need to have access to right away, then we can have another down level of hosting configurations with colder layers, where indeed in that situation, the data can be preserved with all the different security measures that we can have in place. But at the same time, obviously, if you need it, well, you'll have to wait a little longer, because obviously this is not the same type of servers that we would make available for this type of data. But in return, the IT consumption for preserving these data is much lower than the rest of the data. So as you can see, there are some very interesting perspectives to make sure that we can optimize the articulation of different types of instances and servers to make sure that everything can be not only not only comply with requirements that a museum or a cultural organization may express, but also comply with what the environment would require in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. So, as a conclusion, I just wanted to talk about a very important notion, that is the notion of quality, because we talked about the office, the internal practices, how we handle customer relations, and how we can explore new perspectives in terms of making the software available and protecting and hosting the data. But everything can be summed up in one single concept, and it's quality. All companies need a quality policy, but today we can see that if a quality policy does not involve concrete measures that that aims at protecting the environment, or at least improving our actions to protect the environment while making sure that we can provide the services that we are supposed to perform, well, basically we're not doing our job. So the idea here is obviously to help the cultural industry to make the best solution for them and the best solution for the planet. And what we basically wanted to show today is that the software providers, we talk about a web-based software that is in the cloud, but it's not because it's in the cloud that it doesn't have any impacts on the environment. So we felt we are currently observing some kind of a shift, when museums tender out, for instance, and look for a new system, and we can see that already there is they question the place of the environment in their overall project. But what we can see is that this place is going to get bigger and bigger, and the perspectives that we share today is just the beginning. And a company like SKINsoft, obviously, will have to commit, again and again, to make sure that we can go down that road again in a more efficient way. I think I'm pretty good about the time, right?
Thank you so much. Round of applause, please. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any questions? Okay, well, I have a question.
Sure.
So I would really like to understand from a if I was a cultural organisation, what challenge would I have that would mean I would need to engage with you?
Well, I mean, involving the environment, you say, or
Yeah.
well, mostly, the very first thing that one cultural organization need to think about is the technical aspects, because obviously we install a software on a servers. It's in the cloud, but it needs to be hosted somewhere. So here again, there's the question of what type of server you need. And so there is the question of certifications that you need to pay attention to, whether the data centers are fit certain regulations that technical companies and data centers have to abide by. But beyond that, it's also about making sure that the hosting configurations that would need to be implemented would reconcile both the requirements and the level of IT, or resources consumption could be harmonized, basically. And beyond that, what we wanted to show again is beyond these purely technical aspects is also the profile of the company. Beyond these technical aspects, is the company committing to anything for protecting the environment? And this is not something that is particularly sought after today by museums, I would say. But I think that, as far as I'm concerned, is one thing that needs to be assessed in a better way, because obviously, you work with a lot of people, and regardless of, how these people, the industry that these people work in, you have to assess whether these people do it right, in regards to, well, the environment or social related matters. So it's not something that is, as I said, assessed deeply today, but it will, be increasingly assessed in the future. So short answer to your question, as of today, purely technical related matters, but in the future, that will be a much broader subject to assess.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that.